I learned about my husband's year-long affair, but I can't expose him because the other woman is dying, and I don't want to ruin her final months. The knowledge I carry is a cold, heavy anchor tied directly to my chest, dragging me down while I'm forced to stand upright and smile. My name is Clara, and I've been married to Michael for 15 years. We were the couple everyone envied, comfortable, reliable, devoted. We had the history, the shared jokes, the comfortable silence that only decades of intimacy can build. Michael is a kind man, a good father to our 2 children, and until 4 months ago, I would have sworn he was incapable of any profound cruelty. That belief, the foundation of my entire world, was shattered by a single accidental click. Michael works as an engineer and frequently travels for conferences. 4 months ago, he left his laptop open on the kitchen counter, logged into his personal email. I was looking up the tracking number for a package when the screen refreshed, displaying a new message in the preview pane. It wasn't the subject line that caught my eye, it was the name of the sender, Sarah. And the first line of the email, displayed in the preview, was a tender, intimate declaration. Thinking of you this morning, my love. The pain is getting bad again, but knowing I have you makes every treatment easier. The sign-off was a simple heart emoji. I felt a paralyzing coldness spread through my veins. It wasn't just the affair, it was the intimate language of shared suffering. I knew with a sick certainty that this wasn't a casual fling. I clicked the email and read the full thread, descending into a darkness I never knew existed. The correspondence went back over a year. It detailed secret hotel stays, quiet dinners, promises of a future they both knew was impossible. They had built a profound, hidden emotional life together, one fueled by Michael's lies and Sarah's terrifying shared reality. Sarah was sick, terminally ill. The emails were filled with references to chemotherapy, endless doctor's appointments, crippling pain, and the overwhelming fear of death. Michael wasn't just sleeping with her. He was her primary emotional support, her confidant, the man she relied on to face her own mortality. He had spent his Tuesday and Thursday evenings, nights I thought he was working late, holding her hand through nausea and fear. He was playing the hero in a doomed romance while I was sitting at home, making dinner, and waiting for the dependable, stable husband he pretended to be. The depth of the betrayal was staggering, but the context made it utterly paralyzing. How do you expose a man who has been emotionally cheating on you with a dying woman? If I confronted Michael, if I exposed the lie, I wouldn't just be detonating my own marriage. I would be destroying a dying woman's final comfort, plunging her last remaining months into the raw agony of knowing the man she loved was already claimed, and worse, a fraud. My personal desire for justice was blocked by a moral wall built out of a woman's death sentence. I started doing my own research, needing to confirm the extent of the tragedy. I found Sarah on social media. Her accounts were public, focused on cancer awareness and her artistic hobby. The recent photos showed the devastating physical toll of her illness, but her captions were always hopeful, always referencing the strength of her new love and the unwavering support of her partner. She looked frail, but genuinely happy, wrapped in the illusion Michael had created for her. I learned she had stage 4 ovarian cancer and had been given a prognosis of 6 to 12 months at best. She had maybe 4 months left now, maybe less. For weeks, I lived in a frozen hell. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. I watched Michael across the dinner table, the same kind, reliable man, and saw him simultaneously as a despicable liar and a deeply compassionate man caught in an impossible trap. When he kissed me, I felt nothing but revulsion, knowing that his lips had just comforted a woman facing death. But when he left for his late nights, I found myself wondering if he had remembered to bring her the specialized tea she mentioned in her email. My anger was in constant battle with the terrible, misplaced sympathy for the other woman. I knew that any action I took, any scream, any accusation, any filing for divorce, would not only humiliate Michael and shatter our children, but would become the final, cruel reality for a woman who deserved peace in her final days. I was trapped by a death sentence that wasn't mine, forced to postpone my own pain to spare a stranger a final agony. The burden of maintaining this silence, this unbearable lie, was killing me slowly, month by month, just as surely as the cancer was claiming Sarah. I had become the silent guardian of my husband's greatest betrayal, and the worst part was, I had absolutely no idea how to set myself free without committing an act of profound cruelty. The first weeks after reading that email were not marked by screaming matches or thrown objects. They were characterized by a deep, terrifying silence. My house, which had always felt like a sanctuary, became a vast, elegant tomb. I stopped sleeping. I didn't stop functioning. I made the kids' lunches, I paid the bills, I went to work. But I felt like a piece of paper caught in a cross-current, perpetually trembling. The core issue wasn't the infidelity itself, it was the temporal injustice. Michael's actions had granted him the moral high ground of compassion, forcing me into the role of the monster if I sought any personal resolution. My desire for justice felt crude, selfish, and profoundly cruel against the backdrop of a woman's final moments. I started meticulously observing Michael. He was more attentive to me than ever, perhaps a subconscious effort to cover his guilt, or perhaps genuine affection warring with his deceit. He would bring me coffee in the morning, offer to take the kids to soccer practice, and apologize profusely for his late nights. His kindness was a weapon. Every selfless act felt like another confirmation of the lie he was living. I began tracking his movements, not to find proof, I already had it, but to visualize the narrative he was living. On Tuesdays, he'd park his car 3 blocks from Sarah's hospice apartment. On Thursdays, he'd be at the hospital, sitting through chemotherapy infusions. I knew the timetable of their doomed affair better than I knew my own kids' homework schedule. The agony was compounded by the fact that I couldn't share the burden. My sister noticed my pallor and asked if I was sick. My best friend asked if Michael's workload was too much. I smiled, shook my head, and manufactured mundane excuses: stress, allergies, the usual small lies we tell ourselves to protect our privacy. But I was holding a secret that could destroy 3 lives, and the loneliness was suffocating. I realized I was trapped in the same kind of isolation Michael had cultivated, only my silence was self-imposed, a twisted act of morality. The moral paralysis came to a terrifying head 3 weeks later. Our son had a piano recital at the community center, and Michael, who was supposed to be in a mandatory evening meeting, promised he would be there. He wasn't. I watched our son perform, my heart pounding with familiar resentment. As I waited outside afterward, waiting for Michael, I saw a familiar face being helped out of a taxi. Sarah. She was gaunt, clearly exhausted, leaning heavily on a cane, but she was smiling weakly. She was accompanied by an older woman, presumably her mother or sister. They were attending a separate event at the same center. My world tilted. She was within 10 feet of me. I could walk up to her, look her in the eye, and shatter the illusion that was granting her peace. I could ask her if she knew the man comforting her was married. I could deliver the raw, necessary truth. The thought was intoxicating, a desperate craving for justice, for relief from the lie. But then I saw the thinness of her wrists, the lack of hair under her scarf, the sheer fragility of her existence. She had months, perhaps weeks. If I revealed the truth, Michael would be exposed, but Sarah would die knowing her final love was a lie. I couldn't do it. I couldn't be the final, cruel reality she faced. I turned my back, pulling my jacket up high, physically hiding my existence from her. I let her pass, listening to the labored sound of her cough fade into the night air. In that moment, I understood that Michael hadn't just committed an emotional crime. He had forced me into moral complicity. I was actively sacrificing my own self respect and right to honesty to honor a stranger's bed rest wish. It was the most agonizing decision of my life, and I had to make it instantly, silently, in a community center parking lot. When Michael finally showed up, looking rushed and worried, he had been with Sarah until the last possible minute. He launched into his rehearsed apology about the meeting running late. I didn't interrupt him. I just stared at the knot of his tie, my eyes burning with unshed tears. When he finished, I finally spoke, my voice low and dangerous, not addressing the affair, but the fundamental structure of the lie. You were supposed to be my partner, Michael. You were supposed to be the anchor of this family. I don't know who you are anymore, and I don't know who I am when I look at you. But this house, it is choking on secrets. You have 2 months. When the summer is over, you need to decide if you are going to continue building this life with me on a foundation of lies, or if you are going to let me find a life built on something real. I didn't mention Sarah, the illness, or the emails. I didn't need to. The blood drained from his face. I knew. He stared at me with terror and dawning realization. The clock had started, not on our marriage, but on the time I was willing to wait for a death to grant me my freedom. And I knew, deep down, that 2 months was precisely the time Sarah had left. I had essentially given him a deadline. When she dies, we end. The silent confrontation was over, but the countdown had just begun. The 2 months I granted Michael were the longest, most suffocating period of my entire life. We lived in the same house, slept in the same bed, though we never touched, and spoke only in functional exchanges about the children or bills. But beneath the surface, a silent war raged. I was waiting for a death, and he was living through two parallel agonies: the inevitable loss of the woman he loved and the inevitable loss of the wife he had lied to. The atmosphere in our house was so toxic, so heavy with unspoken truths, that even the children seemed quieter, sensing the invisible pressure cooker we were living inside. I knew the exact day it happened. I didn't get a phone call or an email. Michael came home late on a Thursday night, long after the children were asleep. He walked into the kitchen where I was sitting in the dark, and he didn't turn on the light. He simply stood there, leaning against the doorframe, his shoulders slumped with a profound, desolate weariness. He didn't speak the name Sarah, he didn't mention the hospital, and he didn't mention the end of his affair. He simply said, his voice raw and broken, "It's over, Clara. It's all over." The relief was instantaneous, visceral, and accompanied by a violent wave of nausea. I was free. The death sentence I had been living under was lifted, but I didn't move. I didn't offer comfort or sympathy for his loss. I stood up, walked across the dark kitchen, and looked him straight in the eye. No, Michael, I said, my voice cold and steady. The affair is over. The lie is not. The agreement was that when she died, the truth would begin. Tell me everything. He finally confessed. The full, unvarnished truth. The truth he had been keeping captive for over a year. He detailed the loneliness in our marriage that drove him away, the deep connection he felt with Sarah, a connection forged in the crucible of her terminal illness. He swore he had tried to end it multiple times, but every time he tried to pull away, her health would decline and he would feel morally compelled to stay, to be the strength she desperately needed. He admitted he was both a terrible, self-serving liar and a man genuinely trapped by compassion. The confession didn't feel like a relief, it felt like a final clinical autopsy of a marriage that had died years ago. I understand you were trying to be a good person to a dying woman, I told him, my voice devoid of emotion. But you chose to finance your compassion with my safety, my trust, and my emotional reality. You made me complicit in your betrayal by forcing me to postpone my own pain for a stranger's peace. That is unforgivable. The following morning, the divorce papers were filed. There were no arguments over money or custody. Michael agreed to everything, knowing he had forfeited all right to negotiate. He moved out immediately, his silence a continuation of the shame he had worn for the last decade. Explaining the divorce to our children was the most painful task. We kept the details simple. Daddy and Mommy can't be partners anymore, but we both love you absolutely. Their confusion and their quiet, persistent questions, did you stop loving him? Did he stop loving us? Were the enduring cost of his moral lapse. Months later, the quiet settled, the divorce was finalized, and I reverted to my maiden name. The house, which had once felt like a tomb, slowly began to feel like my own again. Michael maintains contact with the children, showing up every weekend, the stable, dependable father he always was, minus the mask of the stable husband. I receive occasional polite updates from the Petersons about Michael's life, and I maintain a polite, distant communication. The financial cost was manageable, but the emotional cost remains a crippling burden. I am free from the lie, but I am perpetually haunted by the question, did I do the right thing? I sacrificed my right to immediate justice, my right to yell and demand answers for the sake of a dying woman I never met. I saved Sarah from a final, heartbreaking truth, but I had to live with the knowledge that I was the only person who knew the full, cruel measure of my husband's deception. I never regretted the silence. I believe that extending compassion, even to a stranger caught in my own tragedy, was the morally necessary choice. But that choice left me profoundly alone, carrying the weight of Michael's sin and my own silent sacrifice. I learned that sometimes the only way to retain your moral compass is to endure the deepest, most isolating pain, and that true integrity often comes with a terminal cost to your own happiness. The betrayal ended, but the silence of the moral choice I made will stay with me forever.